Escalating Revenge. The first post is by Acruzum96, titled Middle School Teacher Gets What She Deserves. Back when I was in middle school, I had a Spanish teacher that was from Colombia. The first few days when the class was getting to know each other, she wore a happy mask and hid her personality. But as months went by, I guess she stopped caring because she turned into a nightmare. Everyone hated her guts, and for good reasons too. When we would read books and look for meanings behind them, she would ask for what we thought the meaning could be. If whatever you said didn't please her, she would call you out in front of the whole class, often insulting you. She would use Spanish words like idiota, idiot, tonto, stupid, and many others I don't quite remember. Well, it was a regular day in class, and the day's assignment was to read a few chapters of our books and make a 2-page essay on it. I finished it, thought it was pretty good, and went to hand it in to her. But the little prick told me right to my face that it was garbage and I should be ashamed of myself. Well, fuck. She had just humiliated me in front of the whole class. From that day on, I hated her even more. And when the day the students evaluated their teachers came, I put a 0 in all her sheet, which made the principal call me into his office. I took the chance and told him about our Spanish teacher and how she would demean students in a harsh way, cuss at us, and call us names. From that day on, I had permission from him to use a tape recorder every time I went to class, and if she did any of the things people would complain about, she would be fired. I kept the tape recorder hidden in my bag, but would keep the bag on my desk to have it close. Sure enough, a few weeks later, she decided to lash out at a classmate when he forgot to bring his homework. She basically called him a lazy, good-for-nothing kid, and my tape caught it all. I waited for class to end and went straight to the principal's office to give him the evidence and say goodbye to the nightmarish ghoul of a teacher I used to have. The next post is by Revenge Skittles, titled The Worst Thing I've Ever Done, or Enough Rope to Hang Themselves. Throwaway account for reasons that will become obvious. I feel a bit bad about this because the punishment was, well, you'll see. So I was a young, naive girl living with her boyfriend away from home for the first time. We had spent a bit of money fixing up a small house and furnishing it. As I was working my first real job at a retail store, part-time, and my boyfriend delivered Chinese food, we weren't rolling in cash, but we were proud of our house and possessions. We also sold a little pot here and there at prices lower than one could find anywhere in town, and had recently branched out to ecstasy and acid. This was 20 years ago, and at the time we did it mostly for our close friends and family. I had a best friend I'll call Rachel. Rachel and her brother Rick and Rick's girlfriend Raina were heavy into drugs and would spend lots of time hanging at my house. They always wanted to try whatever new chemical I had around, and usually I was glad to have the company. I knew Rick was a shady fucker, but I never thought they'd be so dumb as to kill the golden goose. Me and my free drugs. One day, I had to go out of town with my family, and though I'm not a psychic, not a suspicious or a distrusting person by nature, I just had this terrible feeling that something awful was going to happen. As I also have quite the collection of rare and antique coins that I have inherited, my first worry was a break-in. I waited until we stopped at a rest stop and I found a payphone to call my BF. I had him hide my coins. He didn't want to, but I went on and on and on until I wore him down and he promised. Surprisingly, he hid them really well, but didn't conceal the weed, acid, ecstasy, or any of the money we had to re-up. Anyway, sure enough, I get a call from BF 2 days later. Our house had been robbed while he was out delivering food. Through diligent and enraged detective work on my part, they left enough evidence that tracking them down only took a week. I knew it had to be someone who knew I was gone, as my BF and I staggered our schedules, so one of us was always home, except this trip. After uncovering incontrovertible evidence that it was the three amigos, Rachel, Rick, and Raina, my anger reached that point where it just simmers. Seething, boiling just before the surface like a submerged volcano, my rage finally exploded in the form of the most hideous, horrible, patient revenge plans I could think of. You fucks want to rob me? Okay. No problem. I never let on I knew. I kept inviting them over. I bought new and better drugs. With a smile, I kept on sharing these drugs, until one day, around a month after the theft. That day, with a flourish, usually reserved for fine wines and unpronounceable French entrees, I bought out some really strong heroin and rigs. Now, I don't do heroin. I never had before this, and when this was over, I never did again. And they hadn't either. It had taken me weeks to find a dealer, befriend him to the point of having him over to chill and feel comfortable at my place with my friends. All in preparation for this day, Judgment Day. Day one of Operation Payback's a Bitch. I talked that dope up like it was the fabled nectar of Olympus. I showed them how to do it. I shoveled it at them like it was sugar and did some myself. Over the next few weeks, I made sure they came by every day for free dope. On the last day, I had my dealer buddy over and made the introductions. From the kitchen, I heard Rick slyly ask the dealer for his pager number. Yes, that was my cue. Gradually, I began to be too busy with work, or I had family over. 1,000 excuses not to have them over. After 3 months of whittling down any and all interactions, they stopped calling and attempting to come by. I moved shortly after that, and from afar monitored their descent into the throes of heroin addiction. At last count, Rachel has been arrested for heroin and petty crimes no less than 9 times. Rick has been to prison twice, jail 6 times with arrests beyond count. Raina has 4 convictions for heroin possession, petty theft, and prostitution. Maybe the punishment didn't fit the crime. I do feel bad, but fuck a thief and a betrayer of trust. No one breaks into my home and steals my shit. No one. The last post is by Corpse Flakes, titled Short but Satisfying Story. My math teacher began to refuse to take my homework and would give me zeros in the gradebook. I fit the general stereotype of a slacker, unorganized, etc., but I would manage to find my homework before she was done going around the room. She always accused me of copying work, with no proof, and began being condescending to me about my organization. I began moving things around her classroom. It started off on occasion, but became a daily, sometimes bi-daily thing, and she was visibly becoming more stressed. She began to scream about the disappearance of her pencils, calculator, the list goes on, when in reality it was maybe 10 inches to the left or under a book or something. It doesn't seem like much, but she is a neat freak.